The cruelest part about losing someone is realizing they left emotionally long before they walked away. Nathan Carter said it with a grin, swirling the ice in his whiskey glass while laughter echoed across the ballroom of the Blackstone Hotel in downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers reflected against polished marble floors, and the low hum of jazz floated beneath the sound of wealthy people pretending to enjoy each other. His coworkers laughed because Nathan always sounded confident when he talked about marriage, like he had solved something the rest of them couldn't. "My wife is too loyal to betray me," he added, smirking as he slipped one hand casually around Evelyn's waist. "She'd probably stay married to me even if I forgot her birthday for 10 years straight." More laughter. A few women exchanged uncomfortable looks. One man nearly spit out his bourbon. Nathan loved attention, loved the feeling of owning the room. And tonight, in his custom navy tuxedo and $1,000 watch, he looked exactly like the kind of man who believed life could never surprise him. Evelyn smiled softly beside him, elegant and calm in a satin ivory dress that brushed against the floor every time she moved. She looked beautiful in the quietest way possible, like candlelight behind glass. Her blonde hair rested neatly against one shoulder, diamond earrings catching the warm light each time she turned her head. From across the room, they looked perfect together, untouchable. But Nathan never noticed that her smile no longer reached her eyes. He didn't notice because he had stopped looking years ago. Evelyn glanced toward the giant clock above the ballroom entrance. 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes. Somewhere across the city, movers were carrying the first boxes into her new apartment. A small place near Lake Michigan with white walls, hardwood floors, and windows that faced the water instead of another person's expectations. Nathan kept talking, enjoying himself too much to realize his wife had mentally disappeared from the conversation entirely. "You know what the secret is?" he said loudly. "Find someone loyal before the world gets to her." More laughter. Evelyn lowered her champagne glass slowly. The bubbles had already gone flat. Funny how things could still look expensive while losing all their sparkle. A woman from Nathan's office leaned closer to Evelyn with an awkward smile. "You're a saint," she whispered. Evelyn only smiled politely in return. If she answered honestly, the woman probably wouldn't know what to say, because loyalty had nothing to do with love anymore. Loyalty was just habit stretched across years of emotional loneliness. Nathan hadn't touched her gently in months, hadn't asked if she was happy in even longer. 3 weeks ago, Evelyn cut 12 inches off her hair. He never noticed. 2 months ago, she stopped wearing the vanilla perfume he once claimed he loved. He never noticed that either. Last winter, she cried quietly in the kitchen at 2 in the morning while waiting for him to come home from another networking dinner. He walked past her without realizing she had been crying at all. The orchestra shifted into a slower song, while servers carried silver trays of steak sliders and champagne through the crowd. Nathan tightened his hand around Evelyn's waist for appearance alone, smiling proudly whenever someone complimented his wife, like she was another achievement he had earned, another polished thing that belonged to him. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced down immediately. Work email. Evelyn noticed how fast he looked at it. Faster than he ever looked at her anymore. Nathan laughed under his breath and typed a quick response while still standing beside her. And in that exact moment, surrounded by music, luxury, and hundreds of people, Evelyn felt something inside her finally go silent. Not heartbreak, not anger, something colder. Acceptance. She looked at Nathan one last time beneath the gold ballroom lights and realized the man who feared betrayal never understood the difference between a woman staying and a woman already being gone. By the time the gala ended, rain had started falling over Chicago in thin silver lines, turning the city lights blurry against the windows of Nathan's black Mercedes. The drive home was quiet except for the soft tapping of rain against the windshield and the occasional vibration of Nathan's phone lighting up in the cup holder between them. He answered 2 work emails before they even crossed Michigan Avenue. Evelyn sat beside him staring out the passenger window, watching reflections slide across the glass like scenes from somebody else's life. At one red light, Nathan reached over absent-mindedly and squeezed her knee without looking at her. The gesture felt automatic, mechanical, like checking a box on a list he had stopped reading years ago. "Tonight went well," he said finally. "I'm still on the road. You should come with me more often. Everybody loves you." Evelyn looked at the rain running down the window. "Do they?" she asked softly. Nathan gave a short laugh. Come on, Evelyn. You know what I mean. She did know. People loved how she made him look. Elegant wife. Stable marriage. Perfect image. Nathan parked beneath the private garage of their downtown penthouse and loosened his tie the second the elevator doors closed behind them. The mirrored walls reflected two people standing inches apart, but feeling impossibly distant. Nathan checked his phone again while Evelyn watched the floor numbers climb. 28, 29, 30. Home. Except lately, the word no longer meant what it used to. The penthouse smelled faintly like cedarwood and expensive candles. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, glowing beneath the storm clouds. 10 years ago, walking into this place had made Evelyn feel lucky. Now it felt like entering a luxury hotel where she had overstayed her reservation. Nathan dropped his keys onto the marble counter and shrugged off his jacket. I am starving, he muttered. Did we have anything delivered earlier? Evelyn slipped off her heels slowly near the doorway. Her feet hurt from standing for hours pretending nothing inside her had changed. I do not know, she answered. Nathan opened the refrigerator, barely glancing at her. You okay? He asked casually, the same way someone asks about the weather. You were quiet tonight. Evelyn almost smiled at the irony. Quiet. She had been quiet for years. Quiet when he canceled dinner plans because a client called. Quiet when he missed their anniversary because of a conference in Dallas. Quiet when she sat alone at Thanksgiving dinner while he spent 40 minutes outside taking business calls. She used to think love meant understanding someone's ambition. Then one day she realized she had been understanding herself into loneliness. Nathan poured sparkling water into a glass and finally looked at her directly. Seriously, what is wrong? Evelyn stared at him for a moment. There it was again. That familiar confusion in his eyes whenever her silence became visible enough to inconvenience him. He never noticed her sadness while it was quietly surviving beside him, only when it interrupted the atmosphere. Nothing, she said gently. Nathan nodded immediately, relieved by the answer. He accepted it too easily. That was the problem. He always accepted the surface version of her because learning the truth would require slowing down long enough to care. Evelyn walked toward the bedroom, while Nathan remained in the kitchen scrolling through another email. Halfway down the hallway, she stopped beside the framed wedding photo hanging near the bookshelf. The younger version of herself smiled brightly in white lace beneath summer sunlight, holding Nathan's hand like she trusted him with the rest of her life. Evelyn studied the photograph carefully. Then she noticed something strange. She could still remember the exact scent of the flowers that day, the violin music, the heat of July against her skin. But she could no longer remember the last time Nathan made her feel chosen. Behind her, his voice echoed from the kitchen. By the way, I need you at another company event next Friday. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. Somewhere across the city, inside a quiet apartment near the lake, cardboard boxes with her name on them were already waiting. Some marriages do not end with screaming. They end with one person quietly realizing they no longer feel seen. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the penthouse in pale gray streaks through the massive windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Chicago looked cold and distant beneath the clouds, the kind of morning that made the city feel beautiful and lonely at the same time. Evelyn stood alone in the kitchen wearing an oversized cream sweater, her hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that had gone cold nearly 20 minutes earlier. Nathan had already left for work. He always left early now, earlier than necessary sometimes. The silence after he walked out the door used to hurt her. Lately, it felt peaceful. A half-eaten slice of toast sat untouched beside her, while soft jazz played quietly from the speaker near the coffee machine. Evelyn stared at the marble countertop where Nathan had dropped his car keys the night before. Small things stayed longer in her mind now. Not the arguments. There were barely any arguments anymore. Just absences disguised as routine. Last month, Nathan spent 3 days in New York for meetings and forgot to call her even once. When he returned, he handed her an expensive silk scarf from the airport gift shop like it balanced everything out. Evelyn remembered smiling and thanking him politely, while something inside her slowly detached itself from disappointment. That was the strange thing about emotional neglect. It rarely arrived all at once. It happened quietly, slowly, like water wearing down stone over years until one day there was nothing solid left. Her phone buzzed softly against the counter. A calendar reminder appeared on the screen. Apartment walkthrough. 3 p.m. Evelyn looked at the notification for several seconds before locking the screen again. Even now, part of her felt guilty for leaving before saying anything aloud. But another part of her wondered why she owed explanations to someone who stopped noticing her long ago. Around noon, she walked through the penthouse collecting small pieces of herself. A framed photograph from a bookshelf. Her favorite hardcover novels from the office. A cashmere blanket Nathan always complained took up too much space on the couch. Every object felt strangely light in her hands, as if the apartment itself had already begun letting her go. She paused inside the bedroom and opened the walk-in closet. Nathan's side looked untouched. Crisp suits lined perfectly in rows. Expensive leather shoes polished beneath warm recessed lighting. Her side looked softer. Cream sweaters. Neutral dresses. Quiet colors. The life of a woman who learned to become smaller inside somebody else's world. Evelyn reached toward the top shelf where an old storage box rested behind winter coats. Inside were pieces of another version of herself. Sketchbooks, fabric samples, interior design magazines folded at the corners. Years ago, before Nathan's promotions and endless business dinners, she used to dream about opening her own design studio. She had talent for it too. People used to tell her spaces felt warmer after she touched them. Then life happened. Nathan's career became the center of everything. His deadlines, his clients, his future, and somewhere along the way, Evelyn quietly became support staff in her own marriage. Her fingers brushed across an old sketch of a lakeside apartment with tall windows and pale oak floors. Sunlight, simplicity, peace, almost identical to the apartment she had rented 2 weeks ago. Evelyn smiled faintly for the first time all morning. Not because she was happy yet, but because for the first time in years, her future belonged to her again. Then her phone buzzed once more. This time it was Nathan. She stared at his name across the screen before answering. "Hey," he said distractedly. She could hear keyboards clicking and distant voices behind him. "Do not forget about Friday. Big client dinner. Wear something elegant, okay?" Evelyn closed her eyes slowly. Not "how are you?" Not "I miss you." Not "thank you for last night." Just instructions. "Okay," she answered quietly. "Perfect," Nathan said immediately. "I knew I could count on you." The call ended less than 10 seconds later. Evelyn lowered the phone from her ear and looked around the silent bedroom. Then, very carefully, she removed her wedding ring and placed it inside the storage box beside the sketches of the life she almost forgot she wanted. The first lie people tell themselves before leaving is that they still have more time to fix things. Evelyn used to believe that too. Friday arrived colder than expected, with sharp wind rolling off Lake Michigan and turning downtown Chicago silver beneath an overcast sky. By noon, Nathan had already sent her 3 text messages about the client dinner. One reminder about the reservation. One about the seating arrangement. One asking her to wear the black dress he liked because it matched the atmosphere. Evelyn stared at the messages while sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of her new apartment. Around her, half-unpacked boxes rested against white walls still untouched by photographs or memories. The place smelled faintly like fresh paint and cedar from the new shelves installed that morning. Sunlight filtered through the massive windows overlooking the lake, pale and calm despite the weather outside. For the first time in years, silence did not feel heavy. It felt clean. Evelyn folded another sweater into a drawer and noticed how differently she moved here. Slower, softer. Like her body no longer expected tension around every corner. She had spent so many years adapting herself to Nathan's pace that she almost forgot what her own rhythm felt like. Her phone buzzed again. "Nathan, do not be late tonight," the text read. "The Henderson account is worth 8 figures." Evelyn read the message twice before setting the phone face down beside her. Not once had he asked where she spent her afternoons lately. Not once had he questioned why she no longer waited at home every evening. It amazed her sometimes how easy it was to disappear beside someone who only noticed your function in their life. She stood and walked barefoot toward the kitchen island where fabric samples and design sketches were spread across the marble countertop. Earlier that week, a local cafe owner had hired her to redesign the interior of a small lakeside coffee shop in Evanston. It was not glamorous. It was not corporate money. But when the owner shook her hand and said, "I trust your vision," something inside Evelyn had quietly come back to life. She touched one of the fabric swatches absent-mindedly, smiling faintly at the warm cream tones beneath her fingertips. Then the apartment buzzer sounded unexpectedly. Evelyn frowned slightly before walking to the intercom. "Package delivery," a calm male voice said. She pressed the button and opened the door a minute later to find a tall man standing in the hallway holding a medium-sized cardboard box. Mid-30s. Dark wool coat. Light gray scarf loosely wrapped around his neck. There was something composed about him, the kind of calm confidence that did not need attention to prove itself. "Evelyn Carter?" he asked politely. "Yes." "Delivery downstairs got mixed up? This was accidentally left with mine." His voice was low and steady, softened by a slight East Coast accent she could not quite place. Evelyn accepted the box carefully. "Thank you." His eyes moved briefly toward the design sketches visible across the kitchen behind her. "Interior design?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated. Strange how difficult it still felt to say it aloud like it belonged to her. "Trying to be," she answered quietly. A small smile touched his face. "The lake colors work well," he said, nodding toward the fabric samples. "Most people over-design spaces near water." Evelyn blinked slightly, surprised someone even noticed. Nathan would have walked past the entire counter without seeing any of it. "You work in design too?" she asked. "Architecture," he replied. "Mostly hotels." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed softly in his coat pocket. He glanced down briefly before stepping back toward the hallway elevator. "Sorry, I have to run." Then, after a small pause, he added, "But for what it is worth, I think you should stop saying trying." Evelyn looked at him carefully. "What do you mean?" The man slid one hand into his coat pocket. "Nobody arranges a space like that unless they already know who they are." For a second, neither of them spoke. Then the elevator doors opened behind him with a quiet chime. "Have a good night, Evelyn," he said before stepping inside. She watched the doors close slowly. No flirting, no lingering, just simple attention, simple recognition. And somehow, that felt more intimate than most conversations she had shared with Nathan in the past 2 years. A few hours later, while standing in front of her bathroom mirror wearing the black dress Nathan requested, Evelyn caught her own reflection and realized something unsettling. She no longer felt guilty for wanting more than survival. Sometimes the loneliest place in the world is standing beside someone who believes they already know you. The private dining room at Lauron House glowed with amber lighting and soft piano music drifting beneath the quiet clink of crystal glasses. Downtown Chicago shimmered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, while snow began falling lightly across the streets below. Nathan stood near the head of the table, charming investors with the same polished confidence he carried into every room. Dark tailored suit, perfect smile, hand movements precise and controlled like a man who spent years mastering perception. Evelyn sat 3 seats away listening to him speak about expansion strategies and international partnerships, while servers poured wine into glasses worth more than most people's monthly utility bills. Every few minutes Nathan glanced toward her, not with affection but reassurance, like checking whether his carefully built image was still intact. "My wife has incredible taste," he told the clients at one point, while gesturing toward her black dress. "I would probably wear mismatched socks without her." Laughter circled the table. Evelyn smiled politely, because that was what she had learned to do. Smile at the version of herself Nathan preferred presenting to the world. One of the investors asked how long they had been married. 11 years, Nathan answered proudly before Evelyn could speak. "And she still puts up with me somehow." More laughter. Someone called them relationship goals. Evelyn lowered her wine glass slowly. Funny how strangers always admired marriages they never had to live inside. The dinner stretched late into the evening beneath golden light and endless business conversations. Nathan thrived in rooms like this. Rooms where nobody asked emotional questions. Rooms where success could be measured in contracts and numbers instead of intimacy. Around 9:30, one of the restaurant managers approached the table quietly and leaned toward Nathan. "Mr. Carter, the owner just arrived unexpectedly. He wanted to greet your table personally." Nathan immediately straightened slightly in his chair. "Julian Hayes?" The manager nodded. "Yes, sir." The name caught Evelyn off guard before she even understood why. Seconds later, she saw him crossing the restaurant floor beneath the warm chandelier light. The same charcoal coat, the same calm presence. But tonight, without the scarf and winter air around him, Julian Hayes looked different. More refined somehow, more powerful. Conversations subtly shifted as he moved through the room. Staff members greeted him with immediate respect. Nathan stood quickly to shake his hand. "Julian, good to finally meet you in person," Nathan said with polished enthusiasm. "Nathan Carter." Julian shook his hand calmly. "I know. Welcome back to Laurent House." Then his eyes moved toward Evelyn. Just briefly, just enough for recognition to settle between them. No surprise crossed his face. No awkwardness. Only quiet understanding. "Mrs. Carter," he said politely. Evelyn felt strangely aware of herself all of a sudden. "Good to see you again," she answered softly. Nathan looked between them immediately. "You two have met." Julian nodded once. "Briefly. We share the same building." Nathan laughed casually, though something uncertain flickered behind his smile. "Small world." Julian glanced toward the design sketches barely visible inside Evelyn's leather portfolio resting beside her chair. "How is the lakeside project going?" he asked. Nathan blinked. "Project?" Evelyn hesitated for half a second. "It is still early," she answered carefully. Julian smiled faintly. "Usually the good ones are." Nathan stared at her now with visible confusion. Not anger, just surprise. Like he had suddenly discovered pages missing from a book he assumed he had already read. "You never mentioned a project," he said lightly. Evelyn met his eyes calmly. "You never asked." Silence settled across the table for one delicate second before someone changed the subject and conversation resumed. But Nathan's expression did not fully recover afterward. Throughout the rest of the evening, Evelyn noticed small changes in him. The way his attention kept drifting toward her. The way he interrupted her less. The way he watched Julian whenever he spoke. Not because anything inappropriate had happened. That was the unsettling part. Nothing had happened at all. No flirting. No secret touches. No betrayal. Just one man seeing her clearly, while another slowly realized he had stopped trying years ago. And for the first time in a very long time, Nathan Carter looked nervous. People only noticed the silence in a marriage when it stops serving them. After the dinner at Laurent House, something subtle shifted inside the penthouse. Not dramatic enough for outsiders to notice. No screaming. No accusations. Just tiny fractures spreading quietly beneath polished surfaces. Nathan became more attentive in ways that felt strangely unfamiliar, like a man suddenly trying to remember instructions he should have learned years earlier. The following Monday, Evelyn walked into the kitchen to find coffee already brewing. Nathan stood near the counter scrolling through emails in a charcoal suit, sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. "I ordered the oat milk you like," he said without looking up. Evelyn paused slightly. He had not remembered how she took her coffee in almost 3 years. "Thank you," she answered softly. Nathan finally glanced at her. "You have been spending a lot of time out lately." The words sounded casual, but she heard the question underneath them. Evelyn reached for a mug slowly. "I have been busy." Nathan studied her for a second longer than usual. "With the design stuff?" Strange how quickly people became curious once they sensed they were losing access to someone. Evelyn nodded calmly. "Yes." He opened his mouth as if preparing another question, but his phone buzzed again before he could continue. The moment disappeared instantly. By noon he was gone back into meetings, conference calls, and endless conversations about expansion plans. But something from that restaurant dinner still lingered inside him. Evelyn could feel it every time his eyes followed her a little too carefully now. That afternoon, she visited the cafe project in Evanston carrying fabric samples and floor plans rolled beneath one arm. The small lakeside cafe sat on a quiet corner 2 blocks from the water, with fog drifting across the shoreline outside and soft acoustic music playing through old ceiling speakers. Evelyn walked through the empty space slowly while discussing lighting ideas with the owner. Warm wood finishes, soft pendant lights, cream-colored walls to reflect natural sunlight during winter mornings. For the first time in years, her thoughts belonged entirely to her own future instead of somebody else's schedule. "You always look at rooms like you are listening to them," a familiar voice said quietly behind her. Evelyn turned and saw Julian Hayes standing near the entrance holding 2 coffee cups. Dark wool coat again, calm expression, like a man completely comfortable inside silence. "What are you doing here?" she asked, genuinely surprised. "The owner is an old friend," Julian replied, handing her one of the coffees. "And before you ask, yes, jasmine tea." Evelyn stared at the cup for half a second before taking it carefully. "How did you remember that?" Julian gave a faint shrug. "You mentioned it once in the elevator. Such a small detail. Such a devastatingly simple thing to notice." They walked slowly through the unfinished cafe while discussing layouts and lighting placement. Julian listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, he asked questions nobody had asked Evelyn in years. Questions about what inspired her, about what kind of atmosphere she wanted people to feel inside a room, about what success looked like to her personally. Not as Nathan's wife, not as decoration beside somebody else's ambition, just her. At one point, Evelyn laughed quietly while explaining why natural light mattered so much in small spaces. The sound surprised even her. Real laughter had become rare enough lately that hearing it almost felt unfamiliar. Julian glanced toward her briefly with the smallest smile. "There it is," he said. Evelyn frowned slightly. "What?" "The version of you that stops apologizing for taking up space." The words settled deeper than she expected. Later that evening, Evelyn returned to the penthouse carrying rolled blueprints beneath her arm. The apartment was dark except for the city lights glowing through the windows. Nathan sat alone on the couch with his laptop open and a whiskey glass resting untouched beside him. He looked up immediately when she walked in. "You seem happier lately," he said carefully. Evelyn froze for the smallest moment before setting her bag down. Nathan watched her closely now, like a man hearing unfamiliar footsteps inside his own house. "Do I?" she asked quietly. He nodded once. "It is different." Evelyn looked toward the skyline beyond the glass windows. Snow drifted slowly through the night outside, while silence stretched between them. Then Nathan asked the question he should have asked years ago. "Did I miss something?" Evelyn lowered her eyes for a second, exhaustion and clarity mixing together somewhere deep inside her chest. "Yes," she answered softly. "You missed a lot. The most dangerous moment in a failing marriage is not when people start fighting. It is when one person finally becomes impossible to ignore." 3 days after their conversation in the penthouse, Nathan began noticing details he had overlooked for years. Evelyn no longer asked what time he would be home. She no longer sat beside him on the couch while he answered emails late into the night. She stopped reminding him about appointments, dry cleaning, and birthdays for his family members. At first, the changes felt small. Then suddenly they felt everywhere. Wednesday evening arrived wrapped in freezing wind and soft snowfall drifting across the Chicago skyline. Nathan entered the penthouse shortly after 8, carrying his laptop bag and expecting the familiar quiet routine waiting for him. Instead, music floated softly from the kitchen. Not jazz this time. Something slower, warmer. He followed the sound and stopped in the doorway. Evelyn stood barefoot near the counter wearing loose cream-colored pants and a fitted black sweater, arranging fabric samples beneath pendant lighting while steam rose gently from a cup of tea beside her. For a second, Nathan simply watched her. She looked peaceful, not distracted, not lonely, peaceful. The realization unsettled him more than he expected. "You are home early," Evelyn said without looking up immediately. Nathan loosened his tie slowly. "Dinner got canceled." She nodded once. No disappointment. No rearranging her evening around him. Nathan noticed blueprints spread across the island counter. Real blueprints now. Measurements. Material notes. Lighting plans. "This cafe project is becoming serious," he said carefully. Evelyn glanced up with calm eyes. "Yes, it is." Nathan walked closer, studying the drawings. "You are good at this?" The question sounded almost innocent, but it landed strangely between them. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I always was." Silence settled heavily around the kitchen. Nathan leaned back against the counter, suddenly aware of how much of her life existed outside his understanding now. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked quietly. Evelyn folded one of the fabric swatches carefully before speaking. "I did." Nathan frowned slightly. "When?" A faint smile touched her lips, but there was sadness inside it. "A long time ago. You were answering emails while I talked." The words were not cruel. That somehow made them worse. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the city beneath the falling snow. He studied Evelyn again, trying to reconcile this composed woman with the version of her he carried in his head. The supportive wife. The patient wife. The woman who always waited. "You have changed," he admitted finally. Evelyn looked toward the skyline beyond the windows. "No," she said softly. "I think I just stopped disappearing." Nathan felt something tighten uncomfortably in his chest. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed against the counter. Evelyn glanced down. A small expression crossed her face. Not dramatic. Just light. Nathan noticed immediately. "Who is that?" he asked before he could stop himself. Evelyn picked up the phone calmly. "Julian." Nathan's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "The architect?" "Yes." Nathan nodded slowly, pretending the answer did not bother him. "You two seem to talk a lot lately." Evelyn met his eyes directly. "He asks about my work." The room went quiet again. Nathan suddenly remembered every dinner he had spent staring at his phone while Evelyn sat across from him unnoticed. Every conversation he cut short because he assumed she would always still be there afterward. He realized with growing discomfort that another man now knew pieces of his wife's mind he had not touched in years. Not because Evelyn betrayed him, but because Nathan stopped showing up long before anyone else arrived. Later that night, after Evelyn disappeared into the shower, Nathan stood alone in their bedroom, staring at the walk-in closet. Something felt different. Subtly different. He stepped closer and froze slightly. More empty hangers than before. Several shelves partially cleared. A few winter coats missing. Nathan frowned slowly while cold unease crept through him for the first time. Then he opened the bathroom drawer beside the sink and noticed something else. Evelyn's wedding ring was gone. There comes a moment when a man realizes he is no longer competing against another person. He is competing against the peace his absence created. Nathan barely slept after noticing the missing wedding ring. The empty space in the bathroom drawer stayed in his mind like a question he could not answer. Around 2 in the morning, he stood alone in the dark kitchen holding a glass of whiskey while snow drifted silently beyond the windows. The penthouse suddenly felt larger than usual. Colder too. He replayed every recent conversation with Evelyn, searching for the exact point where things changed. But deep down, he knew the truth. Nothing changed suddenly. He had simply stopped paying attention until silence became impossible to ignore. The next morning, Nathan canceled 2 meetings for the first time in years. His assistant sounded genuinely shocked over the phone. By afternoon, he found himself driving toward Evanston without fully admitting why. The cafe address sat open on his navigation screen, while gray winter skies stretched endlessly above Lakeshore Drive. He told himself he only wanted to see the project, only wanted to understand this new part of Evelyn's life. But when he parked across the street from the cafe and saw her through the front windows, something inside him tightened painfully. Evelyn stood near a large oak table covered in blueprints and material samples, sunlight spilling softly across her blonde hair while she laughed quietly at something Julian Hayes had just said. Nathan froze inside the car. Not because they were touching. They were not. Not because anything inappropriate was happening. It was worse than that. Evelyn looked alive. The version of her standing inside that cafe looked lighter somehow, like someone had finally opened a window inside a room she had been trapped in for years. Julian stood beside her holding 2 coffee cups while listening carefully as she explained something about pendant lighting placement. He watched her the way people watch music they genuinely love hearing. Patiently. Fully. Nathan suddenly realized he could not remember the last time he looked at his wife like that. He stayed in the car longer than he intended, watching snow gather slowly against the windshield while memories surfaced one after another. Evelyn sitting alone at dinner while he answered emails. Evelyn quietly cleaning up after parties while he entertained clients. Evelyn trying to show him design sketches years ago while he nodded without listening. Every ignored moment returned now with unbearable clarity. Then something small happened inside the cafe that hurt more than anything else. Evelyn smiled. Not politely. Not performatively. A real smile. Soft. Unforced. The kind that reached her eyes naturally instead of stopping halfway. Nathan stared at it like a man seeing sunlight after years underground. Because suddenly he understood something terrifying. His wife had not become happier because of another man. She became happier because she no longer felt invisible. Nathan finally stepped out of the car and crossed the street, cold wind cutting sharply through his coat. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly when he entered. Evelyn looked up first. Surprise flickered briefly across her face. Julian turned a second later, calm as always. "Nathan," Evelyn said carefully. Nathan forced a composed smile. "I was nearby," he lied. His eyes moved around the cafe slowly. Warm lighting. Soft cream walls. Natural wood finishes. It already felt comforting, even half-finished. "This place looks incredible," he admitted quietly. Evelyn glanced around the room, almost shyly. "Thank you." Nathan noticed the difference immediately. She accepted praise differently now. Less uncertain, less apologetic. Julian extended his hand politely. Good to see you again. Nathan shook it, though unease curled deeper inside his chest. Likewise. Then the cafe owner approached carrying folders and greeted Julian with immediate enthusiasm. I just got confirmation from your office, the owner said excitedly. The investment transfer came through this morning. Nathan frowned slightly before the owner continued speaking without realizing the effect his words carried. Honestly, none of this would even exist without Mr. Hayes backing the expansion. Silence settled instantly. Nathan looked toward Julian slowly. You own the development group financing this project? Julian nodded once, almost reluctant to make it significant. Among other things, Nathan stared at him for a second too long. Suddenly, every detail rearranged itself in his mind. The restaurant ownership, the architecture firm, the respect everywhere he went. Nathan had spent weeks assuming Julian was simply another man interested in his wife. He never imagined Julian Hayes was the billionaire investor whose company his own firm had been desperately trying to secure meetings with for over a year. And standing there inside the warm glow of the cafe Evelyn designed, Nathan realized with quiet devastation that the most powerful man in the room was also the first person who truly saw her. Sometimes love does not die because two people stop caring. Sometimes it dies because only one person keeps trying to keep it alive. Nathan drove home from Evanston in complete silence while snow blurred across the windshield beneath the Chicago night. The city lights stretched endlessly around him, cold and distant. But for the first time in years, he barely noticed the skyline he used to admire so much. His mind stayed trapped inside that cafe. Inside the way Evelyn smiled while talking about lighting designs. Inside the way Julian Hayes listened to her, like every word mattered. Nathan realized with quiet humiliation that another man had learned more about his wife in a few weeks than he had bothered learning in years. And the worst part was that Julian had not stolen her attention. Nathan abandoned it first. By the time he reached the penthouse, the storm outside had grown heavier. Snow covered the balcony railings in thick white layers while the wind rattled softly against the glass windows. Nathan entered the apartment expecting silence, but instead he found soft music playing low from somewhere down the hallway. He loosened his coat slowly and followed the sound toward the bedroom. Then he stopped. Two large suitcases rested beside the bed. Half the closet stood empty now. Empty hangers swayed gently beneath the warm recessed lights like silent proof of something irreversible. Evelyn sat at the edge of the bed, folding the last of her sweaters carefully into an open suitcase. She looked calm. Too calm. Nathan stared at the scene for several seconds before speaking. You are leaving. It was not really a question. Evelyn looked up slowly. Her expression held no anger, no revenge, just exhaustion that had finally settled into clarity. Yes, she answered softly. Nathan laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor inside it. Since when? Evelyn zipped the suitcase quietly before meeting his eyes. Since long before you noticed. The words hit harder than any accusation could have. Nathan stepped farther into the room, suddenly overwhelmed by the unfamiliar feeling of not understanding his own life anymore. Why did you not say something? He asked. Evelyn looked at him carefully, almost sadly. I did. Nathan opened his mouth to argue, but stopped. Because deep down, he remembered now. The late-night conversations he barely listened to. The moments she tried explaining how lonely she felt. The dinners where she sat across from him waiting for emotional presence while he answered emails under the table. She had spoken. He just assumed she would never leave. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly. Is this because of him? The question sounded smaller than he intended. Evelyn shook her head immediately. No, then after a pause, she added quietly. This happened long before Julian. Silence filled the room while snow drifted beyond the windows like pale ash falling through the dark. Nathan looked around the bedroom slowly, noticing all the things disappearing now that he finally understood their importance. Her books gone from the shelves. Her perfume missing from the bathroom counter. The soft beige blanket she always wrapped around herself while reading at night. Tiny absences everywhere. I can fix this, he said suddenly, desperation finally breaking through his voice. Evelyn, I know I have been distracted. I know I miss things, but we can work on this. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. And somehow, that almost made it harder. Because for the first time in years, Nathan finally sounded sincere. But sincerity arriving too late still arrives too late. You only started looking at me when you thought someone else could see my value, she said softly. Nathan flinched like the truth physically hurt. Evelyn stood slowly and walked toward the nightstand beside the bed. Then she placed something carefully onto the dark wood surface between them. Her wedding ring. The gold band caught the warm bedroom light for one quiet second. Nathan stared at it in silence, while something inside him collapsed completely. I never betrayed you, Evelyn whispered. Not once. Tears gathered in Nathan's eyes for the first time in years, but Evelyn's expression remained heartbreakingly calm. But one day I realized I was staying loyal to a marriage that stopped loving me back. The room went silent except for the faint sound of wind against the windows. Then Evelyn picked up her coat, wrapped the scarf around her neck, and reached for the suitcase handle. Nathan looked at her helplessly. So that is it. Evelyn paused at the bedroom doorway and glanced back one final time. Not with hatred, not with triumph, just quiet truth. No, she said softly. That was it a long time ago. This is just the first time you finally saw it. Then she walked away, leaving behind the penthouse, the untouched whiskey glass on the kitchen counter, and the man who once believed loyalty meant someone would stay no matter how invisible he made them feel.